Some of the release highlights for 5.17 is we did some improvements for CloverDX libraries in a demonstration, which I'll present at the end of this webinar. I'll show you what kind of improvements those are I'm talking about. But in a nutshell, basically we allowed libraries to be parameterized and initialized. I'm going to show you an example of a new HubSpot connector, which is currently available on Marketplace, CloverDX Marketplace. We will look at Marketplace just as a reminder from 5.16, so you actually see how it looks like, where to find it. We added new abilities for FlatFileReader, and we will add just a small spoiler for 6.0. In 6.0, we will actually enhance FlatFileReader once again to support more features, to be more robust when data sources are changing. And new abilities which are readily available in 5.17 include a support for BOM, byte order mark, which can be found in UTF encoded files. Currently, what FlatFileReader will do, it will read that BOM, the byte order mark, and actually includes it in a data payload. In 5.17, this BOM mark is stripped, and FlatFileReader will reconfigure itself based on the information contained in this mark. We also added some autofilling functions which FlatFileReader can support. I'm going to show you which ones are those, and with some example of how it will actually affect your jobs if you have existing ones. Again, small spoiler, these new autofilling functions will not break your current implementations, but may add some new possibilities which you can achieve. We added support for variant in MongoDB components, so you can directly read from MongoDB, the document from MongoDB into variant, and then basically just write it back into MongoDB, maybe with some slight adjustments. Again, I'll have a slightly better explanation on a picture later in these slides. Big announcement for 5.17. We are actually deprecating, removing support for IBM WebSphere, JBoss EAP web server, and Oracle WebLogic server. So none of these will be supported in 5.17 onwards. But if you are running 5.16 and previous supported versions, you still get support until end of the planned lifetime. So you don't have to worry about migrating from these servers right now. So as I was talking about CloverDX libraries, we added a special file. When you create a library, you can create also a library.prm, which is a special file where you can define some properties for libraries, which will allow basically server admins to provide some additional parameters for your library, so users can actually use them in slightly better way. Maybe pre-cache some enumerations, or pre-cache some data, generate metadata, and these kinds of things. So library PRM also to kind of ties this configuration to the rest of the library feature itself is an initialization graph. Basically, when you create or export a library, there's a new step where you can select initialization graph. If you do that, and we will see that in the demo, so I'm not going to go too much into detail. Basically, a button will show up in server UI, which you can press. It will start a job which can initialize your library based on pre-configured parameters. So kind of related to libraries, our consulting team actually added 2 new connectors to CloverDX Marketplace. These 2 connectors are kind of special because we've started to focus more on a business end of the deal. So they include connectors to get business entities from HubSpot or Xero. So in case of HubSpot, that might be contacts, companies, deals, these kinds of things. And in Xero, that would be, I don't know, invoices and related objects directly provided by Xero. But also, as you may know from existing connectors, which we already have in Marketplace, these 2 will also include or bundle the general connectivity solutions, which you can take and implement your own business entities. No problem, just wrap the general connectivity framework into it, add some business logic, and voila, you have your business entities basically with way less effort than without using libraries. So I was talking about FlatFileReader updates. So we added 2 new autofilling functions, global row including error count, and the same thing for source. This is actually a complement to existing functions, global and source row count. Just maybe a reminder, source row count basically means which position in the file given a record has, and it differs from global row count when you are reading multiple files, basically. So global row count continues, source row count resets with new file. We included those including error count autofilling functions in cases where you are running your FlatFileReader in a controlled or lenient policy. So the existing behavior, which is currently in 5.16, is that the global row count and source row count basically increments by 1 only successfully parsed records, which may be a problem when you have actually failing records, records which failed to parse from a file, because you don't know if any of them failed and in which place. So that's why we added this global and source row including error count feature, which basically increments numbers the same way. But if, for example, I have, as in this case, 2 failing records, 8 and 9, I will jump from 7 to 10 in my counter. So this way, if you have a gap in your successfully parsed data, you know where that gap actually is and where to find those data. And those data will be on an error output of the component, as you are probably used to. About byte order mark, sorry. Yeah, byte order mark, I do have it switched. Yes, sorry about that. I already spoke about, so I'm just gonna skip ahead to, skip ahead to support for variants. I promised a visual explanation on what's going on. So we enhanced both MongoDBReader and Writer components, so they can basically talk in native language for both MongoDB and CloverDX, and assure like smooth transition between the 2 systems. In 5.16 and earlier versions, basically what's happening in the backend, CloverDBReader provides a JSON document in a string format, which you need to parse, and then work with those parsed values. When you want to write it back into MongoDB, you need to use a component like a JSON writer to serialize object and then put into MongoDB, which basically adds 2 arguably unnecessary steps. With 5.17 onwards, you can deserialize into variant, or you can read data in variant, which is essentially a binary format native to CloverDX. And you can manipulate those objects directly in variant. So, for example, if I would like to create a checksum of my MongoDB document, I can just add it. In here, I'm just reading a short title, meaning basically this value, and I'm creating a SHA-256 checksum out of it and storing back into the record, and then writing into MongoDB database. And I can do that with a single step, essentially. This approach actually adds some performance as well, because you're losing unnecessarily marshal and unmarshal steps, which are in the process. And also it gives some convenience. Of course, if you prefer like working with your objects, your documents from MongoDB in, let's say, flat structure, you can still do it that way. You can use the native binary transport and just use JSON extract and JSON writer to basically do the same as previously, but in more performant way, because those two also support variant now. So I was talking about these application servers, which we are dropping support from. What I want to point out is this article over here. You'll get slides after our webinar today, so you can use a link which is currently in the slide, or I believe Kate just posted the same link into the chat, so you can take a look. Basically, this article talks about what should people do or suggested next steps if you are on these application servers. Of course, you can get in touch with our support, and we can help you, guide or set a strategy if you'd like to upgrade to 5.16 and potentially thinking about upgrading to 6.0 and onwards. Other small changes which are currently in a product, we added a from header in alert and notifications tab. I'm just going to show you later on when I'm showing you the demo. We will take a look at schedules and event listeners. What I mean, but basically this should allow you to distinguish between applications when you have multiple applications running on your server, and you can set from header if you are receiving notifications to name your applications. So you can better orient in emails which you are getting from Clover server. Also, another small change, add component dialog. That's the one which you get with pressing Shift Space in Designer and searching through components. You will get case insensitive sorting. So lowercase g is the same thing as uppercase G, basically. So, small compatibility notice. I spoke about BOM, the byte order mark. That should not impact you whatsoever, because if you previously had problems with BOM, like being part of the data stream, you can probably just remove the workaround which you probably had in place. And the rest of you, which are not facing this issue, there's absolutely nothing you need to do. So there should be no impact whatsoever. What I wanted to mention, though, is we got a couple of reports that CloverDX actually crashes on Mac OS Ventura when it's running on Intel platform. So if you are running on native M1 or M2 processors, you're fine. That's fine. That it's working okay. But again, this only affects Intel platforms. and we released another knowledge base article which talks about how to prevent these crashes. Basically, in a nutshell, I believe it's disable JavaScript in Eclipse browser, and that should fix the issue. All right, so let's take a look at demo I prepared for you. So we're going to take a look at libraries and new additions to libraries. All right, let me start with CloverDX Marketplace. So this is something we introduced some time ago. This is basically where this is a place where you can find maybe some accelerators, libraries, plugins, whatever you call it, which might help you with developing your own projects. We have two new additions. As I mentioned, it's HubSpot lib. That's the business addition to what we already had, the HubSpot CRM API. And also we added Zero, which basically bundles both the technical implementation and the business implementation as well. There are two ways how you can install these libraries. So either you click in here, download a CLib file, and then you can install it to CloverDX server using this browse local files and install CLib file. One of the small additions we made to CloverDX server, we actually added a shortcut to CloverDX Marketplace. I already have it added to my list of repositories, which is why I can select it from here. And this is basically how you can install it. Just click on a lib you want to install, click install, done. So this is existing feature. But what was added when a library actually contains library.prm or contains initialization graph, you will be able to see this tab over here. So for example, this one doesn't have it. So I have only documentation and overview. In here, I do have overview and configuration. So interestingly, there's no documentation in here, but should be somewhere in here. Usually these libraries are pretty well documented. Our consulting team takes a lot of effort and a lot of pride into making this documentation. So you'll find a lot of text in here which describe the function and the outputs of a library. But let me talk about configuration. When a library has library PRM or the initialization graph is configured for the library, you will get a list of those properties and also an option to initialize a library. I already did it before this webinar. So if I click on this link over here, I will get into my execution history where I can see a job running which basically initialized my library. What it did, in fact, it connected to my HubSpot instance with my credentials provided by those two configuration options and downloaded object structure directly from HubSpot. Why? So I can very easily use this library. I have it in here, right? So I do have my libraries available from server listed here. And the one I'm interested in is perhaps HubSpot lib, where I would like to, I don't know, download deals. So very good. Interesting. Hopefully this is going to work. Great. Every time you do a webinar. Oh, right. Yeah, of course. What I did before the webinar, I actually purged this sandbox. So I'll just close it. Close, not delete. I'll just delete and create a new server project. Good. Sorry about that. It's every time you need to present something, isn't it? All right. So hopefully now it is going to work when I try to all right. Maybe I did something I shouldn't do when I removed the library file. No, I'll do this. Libraries.prm and remove the contents. All right. That's what you get when you want to start with. All right. So how it works. Good. This is basically how I can access my library's contents. I just drag and drop the business implementation of a library. So, for example, if I want to download all contexts from HubSpot and do something with them. So maybe, I don't know, storing in a local database. So I'll just use DB-Writer. And that's it. I can just run the job. When I run it, my connector, because it already knows the connection to a HubSpot instance, it's already pre-configured. This particular one does not have any configuration properties. It just downloads contacts. It's maybe a little slow because I'm on a Wi-Fi and my connection is terrible, especially when I'm sharing screen. But essentially, that's how you use those libraries, and it really doesn't matter which one is it. If it's Xero or HubSpot or GIS tools or I don't know, whatever, you can just use it. So that's how you actually use libraries. Now, how you create them. So I already have one pre-made library. So if I want to create library, I'll just right-click, export as library. Also, by the way, if I would like to add those parameters I was talking about, I would just create new other CloverDX parameter file, call it a library.prm, and when I add my custom parameter, maybe give it some nice label and possibly also some default value. I can package it now, export as a library, and as the last step of this visit, I will get prompt for initialization graph. So if my initialization graph would be I don't know, this Amazon SQS deleter, I can just select it. And when I click on initialize library in my project or in my libraries page on a server, I would get this particular subgraph or graph or job flow started. And this can do, you know, all the nice things which you need to do when you are actually initializing library. Okay, cool. So that would be about libraries and installation. Of course, when I exported this Amazon SQS lib, I can directly install it into my server. Again, by clicking here, browse local files, I would find my user home, click on install, and it will appear in this listing. But I'm not going to show you that. What I'm going to show you is the addition for alerts and notifications, just so you know what I was talking about previously in the slides. So when you have either schedule or event listener, it really doesn't matter. All of them, they do have a tab called alerts and notifications, where you can now, instead of just selecting recipients, you can specify a sender, which gets basically into a from header of an email, so you can you can actually see which application used it. So in this case, I would say, I don't know, CloverDX housekeeping. And then, I would get an email from CloverDX housekeeping named user into my mailbox, so I can set up maybe my filters. So I get, nicely segmented what's going on my server.